We are live. Thanks everybody for being here. For Michael Vi, who I'm going to bring in 2 seconds. I don't know if you guys have ever listened to any of my interviews with Michael, but he is one of the more knowledgeable people I know. Eric Davis is up there. Michael Vi is up there as far as ufology and related topics. And I'm going to bring Michael in here, and we're going to talk about Sean Kirkpatrick and his testimony the other day. Hey, Michael, how you doing?
Hey, Joe. Doing well.
I'm not. I don't like introducing people. I like when they introduce themselves. So just for people who don't know who you are for the first time ever, just briefly describe who you are and your background.
Okay. I am a former naval cryptologist, an Iranian linguist, a naval air crewman. I had 350 combat flight hours in Operation Desert Storm back in 1991. I've worked for, let's just say, well over 20 years in the intelligence and defense community. Specifically, my area of expertise is what I call overhead, which is non-air breathing, which means satellites, intelligence collection systems, predominantly signals intelligence. And I currently work now for probably the world's oldest IT company as a cybersecurity consultant. And I also still, I'm still cleared, so I still have to be very careful about what I say with this topic or anything else. So pleasure to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you again. Always great. And basically, so just overall, you got to see Sean Kirkpatrick speak at the hearing. What are your thoughts? I know we kind of battled a little bit over it when I first spoke to you about it. But I mean, I'm more in line of what you have to say, but I have some issues, but my issues are more with the whole, not Kirkpatrick, it's the whole system, but basically, so tell me what you thought overall, and we'll get into specifics.
Yeah. So we'll screen share in a minute, and I'll have my notes, my bullet points. But the bottom line for me, I was really impressed with how sober, serious, and attentive to detail that he was, which was refreshing compared to the first testimony when the UAP task force guys, and I forget their names, doesn't matter.
Moultrie and Gray.
Yeah, they really, I wouldn't say they gave it all short shrift. They just were grossly unprepared. And whenever you go before a leadership body, whether it's inside, let's say, for example, the National Reconnaissance Office or CIA, or, hey, pick your domain, you need to come prepared. And I didn't feel that they came prepared. And clearly they were not, based on the questions that were asked and the ones that they couldn't answer. But this guy, I was roundly impressed with him. And there are lots of reasons that I can cite as to why that is. A lot of it stems from my background and working with some of the most intellectually scary people that I've ever met in my life. By that, I mean, you are challenged to, in my line of work, to present information that is meaningful to them as a decision maker, and you best be prepared, and you best be knowledgeable and on point, and don't waste their time. And so I felt like Dr. Kirkpatrick was spot on. I was impressed, and we'll see where it goes.
When I first watched it, I was like, all right, there were some things that I was pleasantly surprised with. And then when I did the transcript, I'm thinking, now I know why Michael thought, so highly of him, because he's obviously was prepared. I had no issues with, overall what he's talking about, what AARO is trying to do, collect as much data as possible and not come to any conclusions unless they have enough data. But my issues, and there's specific things that he said that were a little annoying to me when he's talking about not doing science by blog. And I'm like, I understand, I don't think we should be doing that, obviously. But my problem is, and I know you agree, the data is out there. We just don't have access to it. What I don't know, and I would love to get an answer, there's data because he said his data is what he talked about does not sound like when Lou says, there's a 23-minute video out there that if you saw it, it would be game over. I don't think that video is locked up in some special access program, almost impossible to get at unless you're read in. So there's a line, crash retrieval, alleged crash retrieval special access program, 23-minute video, and then AARO data. Does Kirkpatrick not have the 23-minute video? That's one of my questions.
It's not. So think about the venue, right? There were two briefings, closed door, public. We saw the public. We should not have seen or heard reference to anything that was super sensitive. That's all probably, most assuredly, something that could have been discussed in the closed door hearing.
But it's not in his chart, though. It's that kind of, he does
why
not
would he mention
that. It's like
why
the chart is like, well, it's like they're really small objects, and it's like, all right, that your data is not impressive. So I don't understand if he did see a 23-minute video, why that doesn't make it into your chart and say, we do have some that are just really, really impressive, and we don't know. They're anomalous 100%. That's for me what's lacking.
I think that he was being very careful. He was being very appropriate about sharing information in a public domain. So I wasn't surprised that he didn't mention some of the things that we've heard about over the last months or years.
Do you think he's seen that stuff?
Well, that's under his purview, so I would imagine so.
Yeah.
But he's not going to, because to talk about that in an open public forum is going to open up the proverbial can of worms. He's not going to put the senators, whether there were 3 there or 33 there or 100. He's 100 people in the audience. He's not going to open up that can of worms to the audience, right? Because it's just going to cause threads to be pulled and questions that will take forever to answer, lots of sensitivities. So no, I wasn't surprised that he didn't mention any of that.
Sorry, I had to mute. My dog is barking. Let's bring in your screen share and go over your points. Like I said, I just transcribed it. I'll have it up probably tonight so people can see that. It was better the second time through. I'm still a little concerned about if he has. I know you think he has access to everything. He should have access to everything as far as, I don't think he has access to if there's a crash retrieval program, I don't think he's been given need to know access for that, but talking about the videos. All right, let me add so there is your screen share.
Yeah. And if he has access to that stuff, he was
not. You see that? Because it's all your DMs.
No, that's not what you're supposed to be seeing.
So that's your screen.
Let me
share.
Let me kill that.
If we can't get to it,
we just did it. We just did it. We tested it.
Yeah, that's what.
All right.
Try it again.
Screen.
And I know we talked about how only 3 senators showed up with other staffers, and a lot of it is staffers. There we go. Well, that's us. That is it.
There you go. Okay. All right. So let's get started. So I could have come away with like 10, maybe 15 sort of hot takes on this, but bottom line up front, I thought he was super prepared. He took it super seriously, and he did a great job. He also was very impressive from his sort of, now we know he's a doctor, a PhD, but his technical acumen, the mastery of the subject matter, and a keen and seemingly sincere attitude. I appreciated that. But it's something that I would have expected from somebody of his caliber. Okay. And one thing that I thought was interesting was several times he mentioned what he called the Interagency. Now, for folks that don't know, there are 17 intelligence agencies in the United States: NRO, CIA, DIA, NSA, you name it, right? It's just go Google it. You can find out what they are, who they are. But he talked about the importance of the tie-ins or the connections and data sharing or reaching out across the interagency. I thought that was pretty important. And then he also, many times, I lost count in the transcript, the symmetry between the urgency to get answers while, maintaining scientific rigor and thoroughness. He's very serious as far as being attentive to doing it the right way, right? And then commitment to organizational success. Now, the one thing I didn't, actually, maybe he did mention it, but I forget how he mentioned it. Chris Mellon wrote an article last year. You can go into Chris Mellon's website to get the details. So I'm going to paraphrase, but the bottom line is this takes money. So if you go back to Lou Elizondo talking about this going back several years, it's about getting the attention of decision makers. Well, one way you do that is you make it a threat. Indeed, it is or could be a threat, but the way you get the attention of DOD and the IC is to get it on a list of things we need to be worried about, AKA a threat. So where I'm going with this is that it takes budget, it takes money, it takes, getting dollars allocated to the effort. So I was kind of more than impressed with just his leadoff and when he was in his opening statements. So just so people know, it's probably the way my mind works is different from anybody else's mind because we're all different. We're all human. But I probably overly highlight. But everything I have in green.
That's good. We have time.
Okay, so everything in green are things that I thought was something important. And then I've got some red highlighted that I thought was, sort of like the horse stomping the barn floor. So right off the bat, he's talking about the threat. We're trying to prevent a technical or intelligence surprise, okay? Whether that's from a foreign adversary country, which they've pretty much ruled out in a lot of the cases that most of us know about. How could it possibly be? And we keep such good tabs without going into details on our adversaries. We kind of know what the technical state of the art is, whether it's North Korea, China, Russia, France, you name it. So we're trying to avoid a technical or intelligence surprise. And here's the thing, the Congress and the Department of Defense, which also the IC, the intelligence community, it cannot go unexamined or unaddressed any longer. Now, my contention is that's bullshit. Pardon my French.
And I just lost my YouTube channel. I'm just kidding.
Well, we've talked about it before. I don't for 1 minute believe it's gone unaddressed. Okay.
Right.
But he's in a public forum. So just, you got to kind of, interpret what he's saying. And remember, when people are telling you something, it's important to think about what they're telling you and why they want you to believe what they're saying, whether it's in the news or Kirkpatrick talking to the Senate, right? There's a purpose and a method to the information that's being delivered.
So right? you said he's in a public forum. Then let me just, since it's relevant to what you're saying, Russ is like, he said nothing that breaks they've seen nothing that breaks the laws of known physics. So he has not seen truly anomalous craft in any video. Is he lying, or do they know the physics that these anomalous craft operate under?
Well, okay. So now if you want to take a tangent here for just a second, know about my love of the book Unconventional Flying Objects by Paul Hill, the NASA Langley aerodynamicist that studied this stuff for NASA, with NASA, and was NASA, and wasn't part of a team. I mean, he was part of a team. He wasn't doing it in a vacuum in the 50s, 60s, 70s. And he concluded that these things do not break the laws of physics. They just do physics in a way that we can't do yet. But
right.
Apparently it was understandable back in decades ago. So here, the spotlight on UAP in recent months underscores the importance of its work and the need for it to be taken seriously as a matter of national security. Hey, that's the reason. That's how you get funding, right? It's a matter of national security.
And even if it is whatever it is, non-human, whatever, it still could be a matter of national security since we don't know the intent. We don't know intent.
Yeah, yeah. So what he's doing here in this next line is that he's talking about the tie-ins across all the relevant bodies, right? Department of Defense, the intelligence community. And I thought this was interesting. Department of Energy. You know, we know that's a black hole for researchers trying to go find out what the DOE, which has cognizance over all of our nuclear equities.
Right.
And we know that these objects over the years have shown interest in our nuclear capabilities. So that, to me, if his department, if AARO is cooperating with DOE, that is a watershed moment for me. I was surprised at that. And then the scientific and the industrial communities, that's kind of really broad. He's just sort of trying to throw a net around things and sound thorough, I think, but I'm sure there's some reality to it all. I thought this was interesting. They got basically 36 people, approximately 36 experts into 4 functional areas: operations, scientific, integrated analysis, and strategic communications. This is interesting. Strategic communications. So if you think about, if you're operating on a battlefield, that would be tactical stuff. If you're operating at a national level, talking about defending the nation, those things are under a strategic umbrella. The fact that he used strategic communications, I thought was interesting. I don't know what he means by that, but he used strategic. Okay, pretty compelling.
And I had no idea they had that much staff at this point, so I was like pleasantly surprised. And let me just say up front, if it wasn't for what we already knew, and like we just came into this, and this was 2000, let's just say this was 2016 or before the New York Times article, I would be so excited about what I just heard from Kirkpatrick. I cannot believe we're having a hearing on this with the charts and the shapes. This is amazing. So I'm kind of spoiled over the last couple of years and speaking and hearing from Eric Davis and other people about crash retrievals. So that's why when I first listened, I'm like, all right, it's not really what I want. But overall, yes, I agree. There's some really good stuff there and potential to find out a lot of information.
Yeah. So if you take yourself back to 2016, I was in the summer of 2016, I think it was. I was on the way to a beach vacation on the Gulf Coast, and I had one of Tom DeLonge's books, one of his Secret Machines books. And I've watched all of his interviews over the years. What we're seeing play out here is exactly what he said, and Lou Elizondo has said, and Chris Mellon has said. It's exactly what they portended to all of us as far as the master plan. So we're seeing the fruits of that initial effort. I don't care if you like Tom DeLonge or not, but the impact that he and his entire group to the stars, the impact they've had, we're seeing the fruits of it.
I would love to hear post-hearing comments from Lou and Chris. As far as I know, that has not happened.
Yeah, I don't think they have to say a word. Actually, I think they're letting the snowball roll downhill.
Yeah, I hope so. I would think if they were happy about the hearing, they would have said something. I know Lou was a little hesitant when Kirkpatrick's name was announced, but yeah, I would still like to hear from them. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So continuing on here, other things that interest me here: improve UAP data collection. And reporting requirements and implementing a framework. Okay. These are all words that you use when you're trying to prosecute a target in the DOD or the IC. Number one, something becomes known that's a threat. You have to have these various committees. They have to prioritize what's of interest, what's going on, what are we seeing, how do we deal with it, how do we get more information, how do we use our national systems, meaning our satellites or our sea-based undersea technologies, whatever. How do we bring all this to bear to help us figure out what's going on? Meaning data collection. You got to collect the data. You need to have a standardized way. And all of this stuff is so laboriously boring and formalized. It takes legions of people to write this stuff up and figure out, because you just can't go, hey, Joe, can I use, you're over at pick an agency. You have a satellite. Can I borrow it for 15 minutes to take a look at Brazil because somebody reported a UFO? We want to take a look. That it doesn't work that way. You have to have it intelligently designed into, if you want to think of like watching television, when you pull up the guide, these systems operate off of, if you will, a guide that's got everything listed by time, by priority, and you've got to get your thing, whatever your thing is. So in this case, UAP, you've got to get it into the guide so that people can select it, go do something with it, view it, watch it, have a satellite deal with it, whatever. You've got to do that. And then you have to have a way to get that information out, which is what's referred to as reporting requirements. Who are you going to get that information out to? Is it going to go out broadly across the world to all the military people and all the intelligence people? No, because there's so much information, Ukraine, the China threat, what have you, Iran, and then you got UAP stuff in there too. You got to have enough bandwidth to get this stuff out there. And so you've got to find a way to reasonably report it, figure out who it needs to go to, who needs that information. So this is all pretty complex. This business right here in this paragraph involves some complexity that our government is used to dealing with. It's just, it takes time, but it's way more complex than people think. And then I thought, looking at the government's UAP related historical record, well, that was interesting. How far back does that go? And what
they were told to go to 1945, which we think of the alleged Trinity case that Vallée has written about and researched. So right. I wonder if he, there's a alleged legacy crash retrieval program, and there's alleged legacy, historical program with everything going back, whether or not they have film videos back then. I don't know if he has access to that, but yeah, it's nice to see it mentioned. I wish there would have been a little better questions from the senators, but I know they had limited time, but still, I don't know if you saw, we talked about, there was a hearing about China and hypersonic missiles with Congressman Gatz. I'm not sure how you say his name, but they were really difficult on the Admiral. We did talk about this. And and the Admiral's like, this should probably be better in closed classified setting. And he's like, nope, let's talk about it here. Which probably, I don't think that was the right move, but yeah, I'm getting ahead of myself. We have another hearing supposedly coming up in June, which could be a little better on the UFO front, but go ahead. Sorry.
Well, yeah. So we can come back to the Getz questionnaires. I think he was pressing, being a little bit of idiocity in that there are certain things you just can't talk about in public, right? And he was just kind of being an idiot, because I think he is an idiot. But I'm sorry, Lord. I apologize. I didn't say that. Okay, so they're leading a focused effort to better characterize, understand, and attribute UAP, with priority given to the reports by DoD and intelligence community personnel in or near areas of national security importance. Well, gosh, it's innumerable. You can't count the places that are sensitive. So the mind wanders. What they really know about sensitive places like Oak Ridge here in Tennessee, Los Alamos, Hanford, other places like nuclear missile weapons silos, as we all know, that have been violated as far as going back into the 60s and 70s. And there's just so much in that, that I think he's just, what I detected here, he said, DoD fully appreciates the eagerness from many quarters, especially here in Congress and the American public, to quickly resolve UAP encountered across the globe. Well, that's sort of an all-encompassing thing. So he's basically saying it's not only just U.S. It's a worldwide look. And then you'll see a contradictory statement here. I think I highlighted it, where they're kind of looking like from 1996 to current day. And I'm like, what? Aren't you looking around the world? But let's go on in the interest of time here.
Yeah, I'll just pull up a question. Question from Michael: would Kirkpatrick have the requisite authorities under Title 10 to establish this framework for data collection? Could agencies decline to provide him with their data? I think he mentioned he didn't have. I know there's Title 10 and Title 50, and I don't understand the difference exactly between them. And he mentioned one that he did not have the exact requisite.
He's working on it. Yeah, so he's working on it. If you look down here, he's working on, we will need to prioritize collection and leverage authorities for monitoring all domains within the continental United States, which I think is limiting. But it's amazing to me that he's addressing all of the little warts and bumps and little niche areas, that things that have to get done. To that question, that's what he's talking about here. He's talking about leveraging authorities, because authorities, each of these agencies, whether it's NSA, CIA, NRO, whoever, they have a certain they have a certain charter that gives them authority. Then there's the interagency perspective of all of it, where they collaborate and work together. And that's another set of documentation and authorities and so forth. It's complicated, because then you get into, you can say, well, it doesn't make sense if you say there are little fiefdoms, but there really are. I've seen it in action. There are jealousies. There's budgetary things. There are budgetary things where one agency wants that chunk of billions, and they don't want it to go over to the other agency. And there's some infighting, and they end up working it out. But it's ultimately very, very complicated. When you hear Lou Elizondo talk about the Pentagon is a huge organization, there couldn't be a statement further from the truth. There's so many left hands not even knowing what all these right hands are doing. It's not like you call an 800 number and you go, hey, I need this done. And everybody just goes and does it, right? So anyway.
And for folks listening, when you read my transcript with Jay Stratton and Travis Taylor, which I will have out soon, you'll see how much progress they did make in the UAP task force. I know that's neither here nor there, because they're gone now, and now we have AARO, but he did have the right clearances to open the right door. So it was very, very impressive. You're going to read it and you're going to say, this is amazing. And then you realize, well, it's a little depressing because we're taking a slight step back now. But I digress. One question here, just quick. Crash retrieval witnesses have full opportunity to present to Congress, have they? I know people have talked about it. Nolan said topics that were discussed behind closed doors were crash retrieval and contact. I don't think Gary's making that up. So yeah, things are going on behind the scenes, but we don't have any testimony yet. Hopefully we'll get that in the future. There's really not much more to say. Another thing, the reason why a lot of people are so antsy and disappointed by this is because leading up to the hearing, I know you're not on Twitter all the time, and where I am on 24/7, Dr. Gary Nolan said he thought by the end of the summer or the end of the year, things are going to happen. Things are going to make an impact with whistleblowers. And then you have other people like Steve Bassett, who's been calling for a disclosure imminently for the past 25 years. But there's another guy, who is it? John Ramirez, former CIA, said we're going to have disclosure in a matter of months, not years. So everybody's like so amped. And then we have this is a letdown when you compare it to disclosure and crash retrieval and bodies. But once again, there's a lot of good stuff in here. And continue, Michael. I'm sorry.
Well, to your point, what we're seeing on screen here, what we saw with Kirkpatrick's testimony, is essentially the establishment of a department organization.
Right. And he said, hopefully one day we won't need an AARO. All the departments will be able to do exactly what we're talking about here. It'll just be part of their mission.
Yeah. He wasn't there to disclose things. He
Right.
was there to explain about a department being stood up, or what I would. It's not a program office, but like that's the world I come from. Every unique, say, submarine system or ship type or satellite program, whether it's an electro-optical satellite or it's a radar satellite, all those have discrete program offices within some agency. Okay. What I read here is it's at a department level in the Pentagon. It's cognizance, if that's I just made up a word, between the DoD and the intelligence community, but it's a bit like him explaining how we have set up this program office, and this is our job. We understand what you've asked us to do. Here's how we're going about doing it. That's what he was saying throughout all of this. Okay, um, so I highlighted this in red that AARO is the culmination of decades of DoD intelligence community and congressionally directed efforts. Really? What congressionally directed efforts over the decades are we aware of? I can name on three fingers, since the 50s or whatever, some congressional inquiries, but I don't think they really got anywhere.
No.
So that's kind of interesting that he said it that way. To resolve UAP encountered first and foremost by U.S. military and specifically Navy and Air Force pilots. What about ground guides? What about the Army? What about the Marines? What about the police? The mind wanders. So that was just kind of weird, interesting, intriguing, I thought. And then he said, we can't answer decades of questions all at once. I don't know what sort of historical research, would they dare involve people like Dr. Jacques Vallée and his databases, or the NIDS guys with Robert Bigelow? Would they dare bring in that data? Apparently at DIA, because of DIA's involvement with Skinwalker Ranch, I believe there is a database somewhere that exists. We know it.
It's the Capella database. The Capella database has all of that data, and supposedly they are using it in the DIA. I would hope AARO has that database.
I would hope.
I don't know that.
But he didn't mention it. So, and probably maybe not in an open forum. Maybe he did in a closed forum. But he does point to, things like the nation's most advanced sensors, and talks about assuming that they can collect the data. I think there's more to follow on that, because you and I have talked a lot, and I can't go into detail about it, but our technical capabilities are exquisite. Okay. And the expression I always say is that people that kind of that don't really trust the government. Well, it's okay to complain about the IRS in my view, or any other civilian government agency. But if people really knew the caliber of the people that worked inside the intelligence community at places like NRO, CIA, NSA, DIA, et cetera, they would be vastly impressed with how their tax dollars are being spent. It's amazing. So,
and by the way, folks, it's hard for me to just interrupt all the time with questions. So try to save your questions for the end, and then we'll just go through them rapid fire.
Yeah, and I'm going to speed up because we're 35 minutes into it, so we need to go a little faster in my view. Let's see here.
And thank you for the donations, folks. I saw them. Thank you very much.
So he does recognize in this next area here that I highlighted that it's more than just the DoD and the IC. It's basically partnering with industry and what he calls the interagency. So all the intelligence communities and the DoD organizations, the commands like U.S. Special Operations Command, NORTHCOM, European Command. He means everything by saying that, and the scientific community and the public. Well, I would like to see at some point when they start having maybe like, you get to a website where you can drop in a video that you took because you had a sighting, or you can get on the chat and you can ask a question. We'll see about that.
Yeah.
But he's sort of casting a wide net and trying to be all inclusive. And he talks about the partnering here Again, he mentions interagency, so he's got a broad view of how it's going to work. And
Any idea how this would work with the Biden interagency UAP task force? I mean, it's like competing task force.
Yeah, I have no idea. I wasn't even, I heard about what you're talking about, but I'm not keeping up with that. I don't know.
Well, there's no news on it. So yeah, there's nothing to really keep up on.
Yeah. So he's saying all the right things, right? He's saying all the right things that Senate wanted. He's saying all the right things that the public wanted, right here. Greater objectivity and transparency in the study of UAP. So again, excellent speaker, very smart guy. He's saying all the right things. Now he goes into here. I don't want to spend much time on this about his very small percentage of reports, display signatures that could not reasonably be described as anomalous.
Yeah, which we know. It's always, depending on which source you look at, 5 to 10% of UFO reports are anomalous. The rest are, misidentifications.
Well, and then he says a large number of cases in our holdings remain technically unresolved. So I'm assuming that probably correlates pretty closely. This is just an assumption, but with the old Blue Book cases, right? There are a large number that they just don't know the answer for. But he says primarily due to a lack of data associated with these cases. And he's a scientifically rigorous person, which was very clear from his testimony. And he's basically saying they're going to go pull out all the stops to try to use national sensors, ground sensors, undersea sensors, academia, and whatever to try to get more data. This is a way that you explain how thorough you're going to be, because at some point, he's going to have, or his office is going to have to ask for more money, because what they're talking about doing is a huge task and is going to be really expensive budget wise. That's my take on that. And then he says, I recognize that what I'm saying is unsatisfying.
They say people with their cameras and they think they're seeing something unexplainable. And he even mentions radar, basically. So he's saying even some of the folks in the military, they'll take video or they'll get radar of something they think is inexplicable, and it's not. It's interesting that he pointed that out.
Well, I'm so impressed with the thoroughness of his thought process. Now, these types of people typically don't write their own speeches, if you will. They don't create their own slide decks. It's done by a staff of people. Okay. But the fact that a lot of this language that we're reading here, it runs the gamut. It's both detailed, it's expansive, it's thorough. They put some serious time into his presentation, right, in my view. Which is kind of impressive compared to what we got last time around.
Right. Night and day.
Yeah, it is. Exactly. So here's just more word salad about, could be readily explainable and so on and so forth. Saying all the right things again, has to pass their level of scrutiny. Well, what is their level of scrutiny? That's kind of an interesting topic to me. What do you want it to be? It depends on the audience. They don't look at it that way, though. It is, what is it, right? And how can we prove what it is? What we see, what we detect, what we sense with our sensors or our eyeballs. So his scientific rigor or his scientific background, again, pretty much impressed me. And then he gets into this business about this high altitude Chinese balloon. That's all just just a bunch of noise. I don't.
At the time when he said, I want to turn UAP into SEP, somebody else's problem. I'm like, what? And then somebody else said, yo, he doesn't want anything to do with this. He doesn't want anything to do with UAP. This is not the right guy. But then as you read more, what he's basically saying is, my job is not to go after Chinese balloons. My job is to go after anomalous objects. That's my job. I don't want to waste time on a balloon. If it's a balloon, and Jay Stratton said the same thing, if they figured it out, it was something that was not anomalous, they passed it on to the right, department. That's your job. That's not my job. So it wasn't really a negative thing for him to say SEP. Just
No.
I want to focus on anomalous activity.
What he's essentially doing, let's just take an example of, let's say you're over in Iraq 8 years ago, 10 years ago, and something happens. The adversary, the guys, the jihadis or whatever, they blow up one of your vehicles, and you don't know how they did it. You didn't see it coming, killed a couple of guys, and you're trying to figure out what happened. So
You're muffled over there. You're muffled when you're over there.
I didn't think you could see me. I thought you could only see the screen of the.
No, I can see both of us.
Oh, I'm sorry.
People are like, "Where is he going?" It's like there's a UFO outside the window, and Michael is looking at it every 5 minutes.
No, that's what I do when I'm on my teleconferences.
But yeah, we're both on. I could put us off.
I didn't. That's fine. I wasn't aware. I thought only the screen was showing. So anyway, they would naturally try to find out the answers, and they would take what they know forensically, and they would farm it out and try to find whose problem is this really, right? Who can figure this out? Who has the expertise? That's what he means by somebody else's problem. It's like, where do we take what we've collected, and how do we determine to give it to the right sort of cognizant group? You follow me?
Yeah.
Or an agency.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's what that basically means. And then he says here that we have tremendous capabilities to deal with those encountered objects. Now that's a kind of a generic statement, but I will agree with him that the capabilities are tremendous. We will never know the details about that, and we shouldn't know, right? But I'll just tell you, I don't like this expression. Somebody used it a decade ago. It was kind of in vogue, but the capabilities that we have are eye-watering. What does that really mean? It means that they're extraordinary. That's what that really means. So anyway, he's admitting here that his office exists to help DOD, intelligence, and interagency resolve all these cases. He's, again, just saying all the right words, validating analysis and underlying theories, peer reviewing things, the results within the government and industry partners. Again, he's saying all the right things.
Okay, let me play the red part because I do have that. Tell me if you can hear it.
Reaching any conclusions.
I can hear it.
I should also state clearly for the record that in our research, AARO has found no credible evidence thus far of extraterrestrial activity, off-world technology, or objects that defy the known laws of physics. In the event sufficient scientific data were ever obtained that a UAP encountered can only be explained by extraterrestrial origin, we are committed to working with our interagency partners at NASA to appropriately inform U.S. government's leadership of its findings. For those few cases that have leaked to the public previously and subsequently commented on by the U.S. government, I encourage those who hold alternative theories or views to submit your research to credible peer-reviewed scientific journals. AARO is working very hard to do the same. That is how science works, not by blog or social media.
So I don't really know what evidence of extraterrestrial craft would look like. I don't know how you would prove that, but I know that upset a lot of people. And then the skeptics and debunkers are like, see, game over. There's nothing to see here.
Yeah, but if he did have evidence of extraterrestrial activity and off-world technology, would he, in that particular venue, would he have stated such? There's no way.
No, he probably would not state, but would he? I mean, I wouldn't say lie, but would he say what he said there? But like,
well, would he even hint? Would he even hint? How could he? That is, you're talking about a major leap in information awareness by the public. Why would he do that in that forum? That's not his place. It's his place to brief Congress and the Senate, open forum, closed forum. But I don't think it's his role to tell us, hey, ladies and gentlemen, my fellow Americans, we have evidence of off-world technology. Extraterrestrials are among us. That's not his role.
Then why even bring it up though? That's why I'm like, why even say that? Then just don't say it. If you're gonna say we don't have evidence when they might, I mean, I don't know if he even has that access to that evidence. First of all, I don't think he has crash retrieval evidence. And like I said, how would you even prove something was extraterrestrial? I mean, you could say it's coming from deep space, you know, that's the most you could say. You can't say, unless you're tracking it from another planet, you can't say it's from another planet. You could say they don't look like humans if we have the craft. You could say we probably didn't build this, but I'm just saying, how the heck would we even get to that point? We're saying, yep, it's from planet ZR2. I don't know how you prove that. I know I'm thinking kind of like we're on two different things here as far as what Kirkpatrick says, but I just
he's sticking strictly to the facts. He's not doing any speculation, and I wouldn't expect him to speculate.
But you think he might have said differently in the closed session about this?
We can't know that.
Yeah, I would think not.
I have no idea.
All right.
I have no idea.
Continue, please.
Well, so this is just more of the same. Then he again saying all the right things, committed to transparency, accountability, and sharing as much with the public as we can, right? That's consistent with our obligation to protect intelligence sources and methods. All this is if I were, if I had to go do this, if I had to go to the Hill and sit down and talk about this stuff, and I had a staff, this is how I would ask it to be written up. Then I'd spend a day or two going over it, because he was bulletproof. I never heard him one time make a misstatement. Maybe I missed it. But he was absolutely polished, perfect, as if he wrote the entire briefing. But that's not the way it works, because those kinds of people don't have the time to do it. They have people do it for them. But I thought I was impressed. I was impressed. He was very professional, very, very professional.
Yeah, I'd never seen him speak. I'd only heard, mostly negative things about him. So it was actually nice to hear directly from him.
Yeah. Now, I'm not going to go into, because people could go to your site and see this stuff. But one thing that did kind of disappoint me is when he showed this chart, or maybe you put these.
I pulled whatever was on the chart. I put in text, so it's a little easier to read. So
yeah, I was, what would it say how would this look if you were like 1945 to 2023, right? Or right. From 11 AD to 2023, it would be, because there's been evidence of stuff going on.
And most of them show up where we fly, which makes sense. Sensor bias, same type of thing. They may be everywhere, but
that's not so I'm not really going to go through these.
And the shapes were good. It was nice to see the shapes in there. It's like, all right, this is, it's the information that was, shapes were blacked out on some of the reports we saw.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that interests me in this whole discussion about, the Navy's seeing them now more often, quite frequently, maybe daily. We don't know as much about what the Air Force is seeing, but we do know their interest in our nuclear assets, aircraft carriers, nuclear power plants, nuclear manufacturing facilities, Los Alamos, you name it. It seems that they're harder to detect, but you can with the right sensors. But if you go to Paul Hill's book, or just go back over the decades of reported UFO encounters, experiences, sightings, whatever you want to call it, you didn't have to have, the most advanced radars back in those days. These things were apparently, according to the reports, much more overt, much more sort of in your face, much more visible. If you talk about Paul Hill, he and a colleague were in Norfolk, Virginia, one afternoon at a traffic light, and they looked out over Norfolk Bay, and there was this enormous giant pencil-shaped thing that was like a half-mile long. It sort of pointed on one end and blunt on the back end, and it was just kind of hovering there. And the traffic stopped. Everybody was looking at this thing. Again, this is a NASA scientist observing this, and then it just suddenly shot off over the bay, out over the ocean, and was gone. And of course, all the other reported encounters of discs and whatever else, triangles like the one I saw, that just appear and they're there. Yet these Navy and Air Force, these Navy accounts are things much different. These things they're much more elusive. They're harder to see. They'll see them on their aircraft radar. They'll vector in towards it, and then they'll have a lot of difficulty, if not even being able to see it at all visually. But they can see it on their sensors. They can see it, with radar. They can see it with infrared detectors. So it's sort of a different thing going on these days. It seems you don't have, as far as I'm aware, you don't have these dramatic sightings where these large, like the overflight of Washington D.C. in 1952, 2 consecutive weekends. You don't have that. You don't have these giant pencil-shaped things showing up and zooming off. It's like they're trying to be a little more. I mean, are these? I don't even want to go there because I don't like speculating about this kind of stuff.
We all wonder why certain things. Yeah, things change. You have the last. When was the last major sighting? I mean, Phoenix, 97. I mean, there was one in 2000 over Illinois and Missouri, but
yeah,
not a lot like that since then.
Yeah, it's mostly now these orbs and whatever, from what I understand. But yeah, it's just an interesting change in the dramaticism of how these things show up. It's like they're trying to be more careful, or maybe they're like, okay, we've been there, done that. We'll just send our probes. I have no idea. I'm just throwing stuff out there.
Yeah, good point. There was 2008 Stephenville, which was a really good case.
That's an epic one. Yeah. So here's the last thing I think I highlighted here, that how are we going to get more data? He asks. He says, we're going to work with the Joint Staff to issue guidance to all the services and commands. Now, that to me is enormously impressive. The Joint Staff means the Joint Chiefs of Staff. That is, if you don't know what it is, folks, go look it up, Google it, figure out who they are, how important they are. These are the highest ranking military people in the land. They have cognizance over intelligence, battlefield matters, industry. How do we build our battleships? How do we create intelligence operations? Their purview is enormous. The fact that he's talking about integrating with the Joint Staff, I was mildly impressed with that, to say the least. So part of his presentation was saying all the right things that you would say if you were head of an organization like that and been called before Senate to report. But the thoroughness with which they're going about it kind of reflects back to what Chris Mellon said when he talked about on his blog site as how you would organize such an agency or an organization like this. And what we're seeing in words is that has actually happened, and it's still evolving. So, I don't consider myself a naive person, but I do feel pretty confident that he was the right guy to have been leading this organization up to now, regardless of how long he stays there, because he's probably going to retire as soon as I understand it.
I heard he's not going to be there. He'll be gone within a year. I don't know if it's retirement or something else. I don't know.
Well, these people don't stay. Wherever they are, wherever I've been, the leaders, it's in their interest to keep moving up and onward, right? They're furthering their career, or in his case, he may be at retirement, right? He's undoubtedly, he's not a GS-15. He's the next level up, which is, I'm assuming, which is senior executive service. Now you can go Google that and find out how much they make, their benefits, and all that are fantastic. So he's obviously worked hard to get where he is. So the end result of all of this is I was impressed with Kirkpatrick, and it'll be interesting to see how they report out the next time. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing.
One of the things, I mean, Gillibrand has been one of the in the forefront of this with Rubio and other folks, Gallego and Gallagher. And right off the bat, she said, because we're wondering, she was talking about balloons in some of her interviews, and it seemed like she was focusing on drones and balloons. But she said in her opening statement, she's like, we don't know where UAP come from, who made them, or how they operate. That's basically, that's it. Basic stuff, important stuff. So it's nice to see, and yeah, like I said, it was disappointing to see 3 senators, and I know they had staffers, but I know more. They said somebody found out more were in the classified briefing. And Kirkpatrick said we are working with industry, academia, and the scientific community. Who? Why can't we know that, Michael? It's like, if they're working with industry right now, in the academic world and the scientific community, it's like, who are you working with? I don't understand why that's secret. I know some don't want to be connected to UFOs, and that may be the reason. And if that's the case, okay, I understand it. As long as they're helping and they're trying to help solve this problem.
Well, the only thing I can tell you about that is that business relationships in this world or that world are private. And let me give you an example. Let's say, and you don't often see this, but let's say, and I have to stick to my own domain. So let's say that the government needs a new satellite and they're going to go get a major defense contractor, one of the Boeing, Lockheed, Raytheon, whoever, Northrop Grumman, to build it. Well, whoever you choose, whoever wins the award to go build that system, they're not going to do it on their own. They're going to have dozens to hundreds of smaller subcontracting companies or suppliers helping them build all the little parts and gadgets that end up making the whole thing, right? But the prime contractor will be responsible for that. But there's just no way in hell you're going to know on the outside who all of those suppliers are, who all of those business partners, it's what they call themselves sometimes in contracts, between one another. You're not going to know who all those other entities are. So when they talk about industry and academia and sharing information in this context, how are we going to know that? Right. They're not going to advertise that. So it's just a thing. You just kind of have to accept it.
Question for you. You have any thoughts on the Alaska Dead Horse object shoot down, on the objects we shot down? Does anything stand out to you about how odd it was that event was handled, how it was handled from an intel public communication standpoint?
My only main point of curiosity is if it was so benign and they finally got tired of this stuff floating over the country and they finally started scrambling fighters and finally started shooting them down and they land somewhere. If they found it, and if they landed in the ocean, I can understand not being able to find it. I can even understand not being able to find it across the vastness of Canada. But if they did find something, then what's the big deal about letting us know? Unless it was a Chinese payload that, once you pop the balloon, it falls to the ground, and now they're still studying it, trying to figure out what it could have collected, how much damage. You're doing a damage assessment thing, like, well, it could have collected XYZ. So, oh crap, what were we doing while it was okay? So we go back and do the after action and figure all that out. Maybe they're still doing that. Otherwise, I don't know what the big deal is, but I assume it's based on probably ongoing investigation that we don't know anything further. That's my assumption.
Folks, if you had questions earlier, I missed, or you have questions now, do it now. I don't know if you saw this story in the news, Michael. All these folks from Congress, Intel Committee, they went to Wright-Patterson for a briefing. I know everybody jumped to a conclusion that it might be, they're going to show them the craft, but I don't think that's what it was about.
It certainly didn't say anything about what it was about other than what they were there for. But I don't recall, you've been doing this a lot longer than me. Do you ever recall this caliber of people announcing that they've gone to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base for a briefing? I don't recall that. And why is that important? So if you think about going back to what they're telling us in the news sphere, the information sphere, and why they're telling us and what they want us to believe. Why did they even have to mention that? Why was that important in any way? Because I have never, and I don't follow that stuff that closely, but I mean, why would they have to go to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base for this discussion that they had? Why would they up sticks and do that?
They pull them aside and they said, ladies and gentlemen, have you ever heard of the Blue Room? Well, now you're going to see it. And the Blue Room is supposedly where Curtis LeMay told Congressman Barry Goldwater, it's like, don't ever mention that again.
Right.
Trying to get access, trying to supposedly see crashed saucers or whatever is in there. But if, you hear John Ramirez, who's former CIA, who Jim Semivan has, he said, he's a really great guy. You should listen to him. And he's saying, we're going to have disclosure in a matter of months. And then you see that story. You can't blame people for jumping to a conclusion. You're like, maybe there is something there. Maybe something's going on. I mean, I'm always skeptical of that. And I'm even skeptical that by the end of the year, there's going to be these amazing revelations. But I hope, my fingers are crossed. We'll see, Let's see. I'm trying to see questions more. What do you think about the best case scenario for Eric Davis to speak openly to the public? It's not going to happen. Where he works, they won't let him speak. So as far as in the past, he's spoken about the crash retrieval program. Let's say he's spoken about the crash retrieval program. He's spoken about other world powers having vehicles. Let's just say, and he was quoted in the New York Times saying, we retrieved vehicles from off-world vehicles, not made by human hands, or did they say not made on this earth? Anyway, let's
said both.
Let's just say, in theory, where he works, they said, you know what, you can speak to the media again. I don't know if there was some other thing going on with all of this talking about whistleblowers, and I don't know if he would be a whistleblower, but I don't know if he would still be able to be as open as he was back then. I mean, he's on Facebook and he says things every now and then in a closed Facebook group, but he was very open back, I don't know how many years ago. It was like maybe 5-6 years ago. I'm like, oh, this is amazing what he's saying. Now I'm not sure. But like I said, he can't speak because his job doesn't want him to do media. So there's really no debate there. It's not going to happen unless he hits the lottery.
To me, it's analogous to Paul Hill at NASA Langley in the 50s, 60s, 70s. They wouldn't let him write his book about his findings. And you and I have talked ad nauseum about, that book and how he had it all figured out. Right. Or they had. It wasn't just him, right? This was NASA Langley. This is not just one guy. But they would not let him publish that. And so that book did not get published until he died, and his daughter Julie published the book posthumously. Okay, and all that's all history. But if you go through that book, you realize that we knew a shitload, way back. And the things that he leaves out. And so he's sort of like, constrained, or Paul Hill was, just like Eric Davis is with Aerospace Corporation. I don't see him ever going public. Not until maybe he retires and they release him from the obligations, and there's a lot of water to go under the bridge between now and then. Of course, we don't know what's going to happen, but if you go back to Paul Hill, he had so much of it figured out. The only things he didn't know really was sort of motive, intent, right, and original origin, and the exact power plant, the nature of the power plant or the engine on these things. But now, as I understand it, after observing these things, or I don't know, digging them up, shooting them down, them crashing, however we've supposedly come across these vehicles, I guess we figured it out. Either by watching their performance and then kind of going through the physics and figuring out how to do it. Because I know what I saw was extraordinary, and I think it was American made, but I have no way of knowing that.
Question: have any of your contacts indicated that something is happening in the months ahead? I'm pretty sure you would have told me that, so it's no. But
Yeah.
following up
Yeah.
on that, what are the people in your circles? How are things? Are they commenting on this topic more than they have in the past?
I've seen an entire, there's lots of words I could use to describe it. I'll call it a sea change. So in my community of friends, former bosses, people that vastly outranked me, I'm talking about Navy captains, admirals, generals, others, and people that vastly outranked me intellectually, people that are, scientists, physicists, engineers of the highest caliber. This is, number one, something that I sort of secretly brought up back in the early 2000s, privately asking them, hey, here's what I saw. What do you think it was? And now it was like walking on eggshells. But in the last 2 years, especially, I've seen an entire sea change where we're all sort of broadly exchanging a link from whether it's CNN or Fox News or wherever it's from in emails. Like, did you see this? Did you see that? And these are some of these people are folks that I would never have broached the topic of UFOs with, right? Because I wanted to maintain my air of professionalism, my respect for them, and vice versa. Knowing the community we came from, you just didn't go there. But now there's this sort of broad exchange in email, and the willingness to talk about it is much greater. The taboo is stripped, as far as I can tell. People are showing interest. I'm part of a large group of people on an email distribution that I receive emails every morning that are sort of, not classified things. Of course, I'm talking about my private email account, made up of some people that would impress almost anybody. These people are, again, retired intelligence folks, admirals, you name it, from the intel world. And this is popping up all the time amongst us. I could not have fathomed this 3-4 years ago, but it's happening.
Does Michael feel there's a conflict arising from whistleblowers revealing research programs that contradict the official stance provided by the podium if it leaks publicly?
Oh, I think, that's there. You've talked about this. You and I have talked about this. This is a difficult dance, right? You have your historical precedents of always denying it. Now you've got Congress reaching into it and trying to investigate it. And you've got the legislation that allows these whistleblowers to come forward and supposedly protects them. But then you've got the dance of, well, whatever they say, can we be told? Because to tell all of us is telling our adversaries. So some of this stuff is going to stay locked up behind closed doors. It's going to be interesting. And I'm sure that the decisions around how to reveal whatever information there really is, that's a complicated process, depending on the compelling nature of the information. My fellow Americans, we're not alone. That could be potentially, I don't know, on one hand, devastating, or it could be enlightening, or it could be somewhere in between. And I'm sure if that's the case, if all this is truly where the data is pointing, that there's something there and something been going on all these years, then they're having to make a decision that's a very hard one to make about how much and when, how quickly to let us know, right? So,
and I go back and forth on that. I'm like, just rip the band-aid off and just announce it. But then I see, I watched, it was a Fox News commentator. He's like, you know what? I don't believe in UFOs or aliens. It's not in the Bible. God made humans and they're the only ones. And it's like, all right, people like that are going to struggle with this. And there's, it's not just certain religious folks. A lot of people just don't pay attention to it. I think because they're scared of what it could represent, since we don't know what it represents.
Yeah. I go back to something that Tom DeLonge said that he learned, for what it's worth. that rather than crush religion and all the pillars of our, that support our the foundations of our belief systems, regardless of society, that whatever this is, and I'm paraphrasing, I can't remember his exact words, and he was apparently told this by his contacts in the government, that it makes the concept, and I don't mean to disparage anybody's religion. When I say the concept of God, the Holy Trinity, whatever, it makes it even grander that he not only created us, it, whatever God is, not only created us, but created this endless, apparently, universe. And there are others that he created. So he was even more omnipotent. He was even more creative than we're aware of, which makes God even greater or grander. And he explained all of that. I just trashed it. I didn't do a very good job of that, but that's what he was basically saying. He's basically saying, no, it's not the end of religion. It's the enhancement of our understanding of who God is, what it is. Like God is I think he said, God is really the universe. It's this power that we all can tap into. Anyway, people can go Google that and find what he said about it. But I thought it was both interesting, and depending on where you stand on stuff like that, it was interesting and faithfully reassuring rather than frightening, right?
Yeah.
And then Lou comes along and he's asked on Theories of Everything. He's asked, how did you feel about that, or when you found out? Yeah. He just kind of, somber. I'm like,
yeah,
okay.
he's like, and they're like, what do you mean somber? And he's like, well, basically, imagine learning everything you learned on Sunday school and blah 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 and all. I don't know if he said Sunday school. He's like, is wrong. Imagine everything you learned is wrong and things aren't how they seem. I hope I love to hear that, because I don't. For me and you, I'm like, we can handle it, but we know people are going to have a big time struggle with whatever it is. This is a good one. Does Michael have any thoughts, and I know you do, regarding Stratton and Taylor's move to Radiance Technologies? Any ideas on this from a strategic point of view, what they might be planning, anticipating?
Well, this might surprise even you, because we haven't talked about it, but I'm actually putting in an application to Radiance Technologies.
Oh, exclusive. Really?
Well, because they're south of me here in Huntsville, but has nothing to do with these two guys.
And you would be in Huntsville?
Yep. It's about an hour south of me. It's
another reason for me to come to the Southeast. Although you already are in the Southeast.
You could do a 3-in-1. Radiance interests me. I'm at the sunset of my career. I don't really plan on leaving my company, but because I want to go to Huntsville, Radiance is a big player there. So I probably want to, at my age, you don't hire a 59-year-old easily, right? Unless I'm very high value for something.
Right.
So, but I don't see anything weird about it. In other words, do I think that Radiance would be involved in? I have no idea if they're involved in this topic, but they would certainly, these two individuals, it's not that they have baggage, but they have sort of a common interest or common involvement in some ways. I can't answer the question. I don't know from a strategic point of view if this is pointing towards maybe Radiance involvement in this topic. I don't know.
Somebody said this is the most important thing in the history of mankind. You would think that Congress would have kicked the doors open on these legacy programs by now. This should ring alarm bells, suggesting that there's really nothing to it. I think that's what they're saying. What would happen if the Gang of Six found out that Lockheed had a craft, they knew what building it was, and they showed up there? Would they just be met by armed guards and say, you don't have a need to know, you're not on the list, sorry, go away, like Admiral Wilson?
Did you leave 2 out for a purpose?
Did I leave what out?
It's a Gang of 8.
Gang of 8. See, I'm tired. Where did I come up with a Gang of 6? Well, we made an edit. There's only 6 now. Sorry.
Yeah. Let me think about that. I mean, we've kind of talked about this before. The stigma around it for decades has been the biggest problem. And this goes back to DeLong, Mellon, Elizondo, and the whole rest of the crew getting, little lowball people like me involved that had a sighting because they wanted to have, and they did it with the Unidentified series on History Channel. That was designed to both educate America and help begin to strip the taboo from the topic. So none of this would have occurred without this, what I would kind of call the Herculean effort from To the Stars. I mean, I don't care if people like them or not. I don't care if you invested in To the Stars or not. But what they did, what Chris Mellon has done, what Lou Elizondo has done, was absolutely instrumental in getting the ball rolling. Otherwise, we would all be back to about 2016 and going on YouTube, looking for UFO videos and trying to figure out what's going on. And was Skinwalker Ranch even a thing in our psyche back then, right? All of this, the credit goes to those guys. And now we see the legislation in Congress and the Senate. I wouldn't have dreamed. I can remember back in the intel community in the early 2000s, me quietly asking colleagues and drawing on the whiteboard what I saw and saying, hey, is this like a program that I don't know about? And this is ours? Or was this, and I didn't even want to say, or was this a UFO? I didn't dare hardly say that. I mean, because you just didn't do it. We've come a long way, right? In a very short time. And I understand people are impatient with it. I think, I've said this before, and I'm going to have to go shortly, but I've said this before. It's be careful what we ask for, right? Maybe it's so grand and wonderful that there's a gee whiz moment where they go, oh, they roll out some technology and we go, oh, wow, so we have cracked anti-gravity. I don't think that's going to happen. I think the other aspect of where we got that technology from and what these things are and who it is, why they're here is really super sensitive. So maybe some people say they can handle it. Maybe we can. Maybe it'll be shocking to others. Maybe it'll be worse than shocking to others. And it's not just others. It's not just your neighbor. You got to think about all the world's societies, all the world's religions, all their belief systems. How do you roll something out to the world that is potentially so, if it's off world or what have you, how do you do that? And how do people react? It's a really big problem. It's a huge, huge challenge to try to figure out how to do that.
I'm going to follow up. I'm going to give you one more question, but I'm going to just follow up with, this is somebody I'm pretty sure I told you who told me this, but I'm not going to say. Very credible person. They said, and I've said this on Twitter, but I have not said all of it. Absolute bombshell revelations will occur for the general populace once certain people come forward. Some people will be relieved, some people will be scared, and some people will be angry. It will depend on your perspectives. So, kind of what you're saying. Your last question. For Michael, after your segment on the show with Lou, did Lou help you understand your sighting better? And then roll from that into why, if we did crack gravity, we haven't been using it in wartime to defend ourselves. I know you've answered that before, but I get that question on Twitter all the time.
I appreciate that question. Somebody's obviously, I would think, it's maybe seen us talk about this before. It's a good question.
Last one.
So I'm torn between. If you give me a second, I can go find that PowerPoint chart that I made.
Sure, go ahead.
That I created from Lou's drawing on a piece of paper somewhere.
Yeah, go ahead.
put on my old man glasses here.
By the
just
way,
give
the
you-
person who sent $10 and told me to look at the Forever Conscious Research channel on YouTube, I watched that. It's a really good channel, and the guy goes over all the near-death experiences and focuses a lot on the outlier near-death experiences that you don't hear about as much. Basically, they talk about the reincarnation trap theory, but it's a really good channel. Forever Conscious Research channel. And thank you for anybody else who sent stickers and stuff. And I'm sorry if I didn't get to every question. Let me know when you're ready, Michael, because I can answer questions too.
All right, I'm going to share my screen.
Yeah, Jimmy Carter did apparently hold his head in his hands and wept after being briefed. And I talked to somebody who knew the Secret Service agent who apparently saw him crying. Who knows what he was told? Then we have John Harrington, who supposedly cried himself to sleep for 6 weeks every night after briefing underground. What did they tell him? Well, this is the world my daughters are going to live in. That's what he said. That was Bryce Zabel's partner, Brent Friedman, who met with Harrington after he drove Harrington's car across the country, and Harrington apparently wanted to get it off his chest.
So are you seeing me or my screen?
Right now I'm seeing you, but what's the screen look? Oh yeah, there we go. So now it's both of us. I can put right now it's just the screen.
Just show the screen.
Yep, just the screen.
So in answer to the question, Lou, so let me explain how this happened. So my interview with Lou is over, and I wasn't the only guy there.
Your interview with Lou for the show Unidentified, for people who haven't seen it.
That's right. And so I go back out to this thing called the green room, and I'm hanging out, and it's catered. I'm hanging out. And I asked the producer who came in and thanked me, I said, hey, before the shuttle takes me back, or the driver takes me back to the hotel, can you ask Lou if I can get a few minutes with him alone? And so he did. And we did. And in about an hour's time, Lou and I go back into this, it's like a pantry area at A&E Studios. And we go even further back inside there where there's a printer and a copier bay. Really nice facility, right? So we're back there alone. The door is closed. And I said to him, so, we're both cleared, right? We're not in a skiff. We both know that. He set the ground rules. I recognize the ground rules, but I said, what did I really see? I said, because I have some ideas. So he went over to the printer and he opens up the printer, the bay where you put the paper in the big, huge printer machine. He pulls out 2 or 3 sheets. He takes a ballpoint pen and he asked me a question. So if you can see the screen, he asked me, before he drew anything, he said, what is the most commonly cited or reported type of UFO over the decades or the millennia, whatever? And I said, well, it's a disc or a flying saucer. So he drew this disc. And then he said, so imagine, or supposedly, he used words interchangeably, imagine and supposedly. He said, so based on all the reports over the decades, these discs that are spotted, they emit some sort of electromagnetic field or electromagnetic-like field, okay? This field causes the ambient air around the vehicle, so I'm calling the disc a vehicle, it ionizes the air in much the same way as the gas inside of a fluorescent light bulb is ionized and glows whenever you flip the switch on and turn the light on. Okay. It excites the molecules, the oxygen, the nitrogen, the carbon, all the molecules in the air surrounding that flying saucer or that disc, and it makes it glow. And depending on the power level of the engine, if it's at idle versus medium or full power, it makes the air glow a different color. Now, something else he explained, and Paul Hill explains as well, is the air glows according to the cleanliness, the purity of the air. So in a polluted environment, around, say, a steel mill or some other more polluted or humid environment, the air is going to look different because there are other components in the surrounding air that are being energized by this electromagnetic field, this very high energy field surrounding this disk. Okay. So I saw one of these. I saw exactly this. I saw a black equilateral triangle, and this is about as close as I could make it. And I saw 3 really bright dots that I took to be lights, but they're not lights, according to Lou. They are each something using a propulsion system like this, and they are glowing. It's the air around the vehicle that's glowing, and it is these 3 particular power plants, one in each corner, that give the vehicle cancels out its mass. In other words, makes it sort of gives it its anti-gravity effect or whatever. But that's all they do. They each have a field that they emit, just like the disk has a field when it's powered up. And so these fields overlap like a Venn diagram. And so they encompass the entire vehicle. They make it weightless. But then there's another engine or power plant or whatever in the center. And this is the one that makes it go up, down, left, right, whatever. These 3 give it weightlessness. This engine is how they get from point A to point B. That's kind of what he explained. So then I said, well, what about these cigar-shaped things that people saw, or that torpedo pencil-shaped thing that Paul Hill and his colleagues saw from NASA Langley back in Norfolk decades ago? So he said, well, the cigar-shaped ones, he said, imagine, he didn't say they did, he said, imagine that there's the same similar sort of propulsion source as placed here in this, and this is, again, I made this from his drawing, and the fields that give it its weightlessness, they overlap like a Venn diagram, right? But then there would also, either they are co-producing forward power to go forward, backwards, up, down, left, right, or there maybe is another engine or what have you, power plant, reactor, whatever it is, that gives it its go. And these 2 things give it its weightlessness. So that's how he answered my question about what I saw.
You think he was insinuating that the triangle was ours?
Well, I told him that based on my time in the Persian Gulf and lots of other things to do with work and following air traffic, whether it's military aircraft or commercial aviation, I said, this thing, number one, it flew directly overhead in the same exact direction we were headed. It's like it was, if you can imagine being in an airplane over a big lake, Lake Mead or any other lake, where people are in boats down below, and there's a boat that's way up ahead. You don't see it because you're looking straight down, but you see this wake. And so when you go, where's that boat going? Or where is the boat? So you kind of just keep following the wake, and then boom, there's the boat, right? You're directly overhead. It was as if I'm not saying it did, because it just, I think it was coincidence, but it was headed north just like we were. And it came from a direction that, and it's just totally speculation. In that region of the world, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates countries, all of those are allies of ours in some ways, many ways. And if you go back to the first Gulf War, nobody had ever heard of the F-117. And on the opening night of the war, the F-117 and successive nights thereafter, we lost none of them, but they were bombing Baghdad with impunity. Where did they come from? They came from these austere, secret Air Force bases that we had built out in the desert of Saudi Arabia. And those places are there as a contingency. There's no one for miles around such a vast open, countryside or desert. And so we could conceivably have something that's a reconnaissance plane in the shape of a triangle that doesn't show up on radar, that conceivably, this thing was headed north. What was north of us that day? Iraq. Okay, Saddam was still in power. This is 1992. So this is all speculation. But I told him that my sense was that there was a pilot in that thing, that it was American made, and it was on a reconnaissance mission. I can't know that, right? And we'll probably never know. But the fact that so right next to where I was, for folks that don't know, I was on an Aegis cruiser, and I was up about as high as you can get on the ship without climbing the mast up where all the flags and the radars and things are. I was standing up there with the 3 other people that were going about their business, doing their jobs. I was just kind of hanging out. To my left, about 150 feet away, was an aircraft carrier. And we were hooked up to this aircraft carrier with cables, lines, and hoses, doing a thing called underway replenishment, at sea replenishment. There were no flight ops going on, but the point is, this thing overflew us in midday, broad daylight, and it overflew a national asset. An aircraft carrier is a national asset. It is sovereign United States territory, and it is protected like you would not believe. The airspace around it is not to be violated. Super sensitive. Everybody's on high alert, supporting that aircraft carrier, protecting her from possible attack, either from submarines or aircraft or whatever. So the fact that this thing overflew the aircraft carrier and nobody twitched was kind of bizarre to me. So either it was
other people saw it too, right?
At least one other guy, because we both looked up and said the same thing at the same time. WTF.
Right.
And the fact that, and you can go on the website Fighter Suite.
It was silent, right?
Well, so it wasn't silent where I was. I mean, meaning the environment wasn't silent. It's pretty noisy because this cruiser is powered by a giant.
The craft was silent, as far as you can tell.
I didn't hear, like when a jet overflies you
Right.
and you're out there at sea, you hear the jet. This didn't make any noise whatsoever. Not that it wasn't making noise, but I didn't hear it because the ship itself that I was on is powered by a huge, like a DC-10 jet engine. That's what powers it. It's a jet engine. It's burning kerosene, and it's all, down geared back down to the shaft, to the propellers and whatever else. But the sound that comes from the smokestack, or whatever you want to call it, the exhaust, it sounds like a jet engine running. You hear the whistle, the whine, and all that. So, but anytime you're on one of those vessels and say Navy jets fly over you, and they do all the time, well, you hear the Navy jet fly over because they're really loud, right? This thing didn't. And it also didn't show up on radar. Somebody was saying you ran down and checked and it was not on radar. It should have been on radar. You made it down quickly. And Michael has explained this in detail in my first interview for people who want to watch that. I know you got to go. Just quickly, why don't we use the technology if we've cracked gravity? Just your brief version of why we wouldn't break out this technology if we had it. Well, why would you? You don't need to. So the Russians have their 5th or 6th generation fighters. We've got our F-22 and now the F-35 to counter that. The Chinese have whatever junk they create. You don't need to come out with UFO type technology to defeat your adversary. Now, would you be using it covertly to do what's called ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, spying? floating silently and invisibly over the Kremlin and sucking up data or something like that, or anything else, anywhere else in the world. Sure, I could see that. But you wouldn't want it. You'd have to be very careful about where you deploy that thing, because what if it malfunctions? What if it has to crash land? Then the game is up. That is, if we have that technology. My speculation is that we do, but I don't have any proof. But you don't need to bring it to bear, because it's not necessary. And once you do, like if they rolled it out Monday afternoon at Palmdale, at Skunk Works or whatever, and had a big television event, here's our, what is it, TR3B or whatever. What's the point? Because now everybody's going to be clamoring, well, if you could do that, oh, well, clean energy. And they wouldn't dare. They wouldn't dare. It would be so tightly held. It would be, I've said this before, if you have such game-changing technology, you would really only bring it to bear if your national survival was at stake. If you had no other choice at this stage. Now, if another country suddenly cracked it and rolled out something like that, then you might say, hey, yeah, well, we've got one too. As a matter of fact, we've got 15 or whatever.
Right.
But no, you wouldn't. There's no need. There's no need. It's an ace in the hole technology, if it exists for real. And you don't show your cards, right? So that's my take. But that's
I was going to say, and with that, I will let you go. Like I said, folks are asking questions about his sighting, like what he did afterwards. It's like, I interviewed him first time, and that's what we focused on. So I will, if you search on YouTube in my videos, you'll see it. Michael, thank you again.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, Joe.
One day we will do Paul Hill soon. I promise.
Yeah.
I promise.
Well, that's fine. Remember, the main reason to do the Paul Hill book report, if you will, is because it just kind of shows you that a lot of what we're seeing, even with the standing up of AARO and all these machinations on Capitol Hill, to me, it's like, don't pretend to me like we have to go out and reinvent the wheel. When Bill Nelson, the head of NASA, is talking about, they set up this research group and they're looking into UAP. My first question to him, and I can't believe nobody's asked him this, is what about NASA Langley in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and Paul Hill, who was an aerodynamicist, a validated employee. He's got all the bona fides. You can go look him up. He was a real person doing real research at a real organization within NASA. Are they even aware of this? Surely they are. But somebody needs to ask that question. What about Paul Hill? What about NASA Langley's research in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and all of these knowns? And he shows the math in that book, literally shows the research and how they derived the answers that they got. Again, they got everything. They understood the luminosity. They understood the movement, the rapid acceleration, the right angle turns, the ground effects, the ground traces. And he has exact cases where these traits were determined or observed and then go and proven out. Shows the research, the physics behind how they verified it. Is NASA today, are they using this information as a launching point, as a departure point for their current research? That's what I would want to ask him.
And I had somebody privately, I asked them, I said, what did you think about the Kirkpatrick and Avi Loeb paper? And they called it a BS paper from the aspect of when they were talking about, you would see a fireball, you would hear a sonic boom. This stuff is, we have to stick with physics, how we know it. And this person said they need to read Paul Hill's book. So yeah. You're in good company. And I need to read it, and we need to do that show. I'm going to let you go because I'm tired too. So
All right.
we'll talk soon. Thanks again,
All
Michael.
right. You're very
All right.
welcome. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
See ya. I'm glad you guys like that. And I know there's even more we talk about Kirkpatrick. He went into a lot of detail. As far as Steve, you had mentioned, am I getting tired of the it's happening soon, it's happening soon? Yeah, of course. I mean, that's why I'm like, all right, we'll see. This year, this summer, people are making so many predictions, and some of them allegedly work in intelligence, like Richard Butt on Twitter. And then you have Gary Nolan saying this summer is going to bring some really good stuff by the end of the summer, end of the year. I had my own source tell me stuff was coming, but they did not put a time frame on it, which is smart. I'm not really. Anytime anybody gives a time frame, I'm always skeptical because it never happens, and it rarely ever happens. So it's never smart to give a time frame. But you had John Ramirez saying in the next few months we're going to have disclosure, and Steve Bassett saying that. So we'll see. I mean, I'm not expecting that, but if it happens, we're great. But I'd rather be the one who says, don't hold your breath. And if I'm wrong, great. We'll see. It's not, I mean, we're in mid-April. So April 23rd. We don't have that long to wait. It's going to go quickly. We get Lou's book at the end of the year. Could that be part of that? I hope so. I mean, Lou said when we read his books, we're going to say, oh, that was really, oh, now that makes sense. Something like that. So I hope the book is a blockbuster, and I hope that's part of it. I mean, I don't know if you guys remember, but Stephen Greer, love him or hate him, said that Danny Sheehan came to him and said, Lou was in a government facility and he saw a craft. So maybe that'll be in the book. I would think not. I think Lou denied that. And then Sean Cahill came in really strong, but I still think it might have happened. I'm only going to stay on for a couple more minutes. James, yeah, we'll see. I mean, we keep hearing about James Webb in announcements. I mean, sure, eventually they're going to have a breakthrough. That would make more sense than, saying aliens are here. People can accept a James Webb discovery on an exoplanet saying they have signs of life. Yes, I don't consider it BS, not yet, and Steve Bassett has been predicting disclosure since the mid-90s when I got into this. Dedicated guy, seems like a nice guy, but it's like, but it's not just him. So I don't know. Ramirez has his answer for the next few months to years. No, I thought he said next year would be okay too. It's just we've been waiting so long, it wouldn't be that much of a difference from a few months to next year. I'd be happy with either one. I don't expect either one, but things are happening. I mean, like Michael said, we have hearings. We never expected hearings like this. And we're talking, basically it's like I said, if it wasn't for hearing about crash retrievals and whistleblowers, that hearing would just be spectacular. 5 years ago, we would be like, oh my God, I cannot believe we're having a hearing on this. Need to see results now. Been a long time. Yeah, I know. For me, it's 95 or so. So Lou's book should be good. And I'm really looking forward to that one. The AARO website. Yeah. The AARO website, he said they submitted all of that stuff by December. So somebody's dragging their feet. And I think that's the office of Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security. I think that's the same office Lou had a problem with. And I think Gillibrand said they're only supposed to be providing administrative support, but who knows? We'll see. I don't know. I mean, I don't really have expectations about that big reveal. So I listen, I'm interested, and I hope, but I mean, I like the topic as it is because it's interesting. I would love to get some sort of revelation before I die, and the House hearings in June could be good. Even if it's just people we know, because the general public really hasn't heard from Lou in a long form setting. If he's sitting there asking questions, and the Republicans are really tough as far as asking questions, the ones we saw. That would be fantastic. And even then, you can get some of Lou's non-answers in a hearing setting would be pretty good. Greer is holding disclosure in June. I know he has an event. We'll see. Hey, if he has good witnesses, all power to him. I mean, we'll see. That's only a couple of months away. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how he's supported himself from UFOs. He doesn't really sell anything, Bassett. He has his website, Paradigm Research. So why do so many think they are coming from another planet when it could be a dimension here on Earth? That's what I didn't like about Kirkpatrick saying, anywhere from foreign adversary to extraterrestrial, which was an extreme theory. He said it's not an extreme theory. If you're a scientist, there is no extreme theory. Either the data is there or the data is not, as far as non-human, not extraterrestrial. I think he should have said non-human or not just anomalous. It's really tough, like I said, to figure out what it is. Even if we have a crash retrieval with bodies, you can say, well, they look like they're not human and we can't make that, but you can't say it's from another planet. You can't say it's an extraterrestrial. It could be based here. It could be future humans. Who the hell knows? You can't, there's no way to prove that. I've made a joke, unless it says made on Mars on the alien's butt, or the saucer, but who knows? I have not done it. I haven't even read it all. I haven't even read it, so I need to. And I know there's a lot of good stuff in there. I could do a 10-hour Forbidden Science Volume 5 review. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. That's important. If it's high-level folks, like I said, if it's a name we know from within the government saying, I saw X, Y, and Z, that'll make a difference. I don't think it'll be enough. It won't be proof, and it won't be enough evidence for people if it's just anecdotal. Moultrie, I don't know if Moultrie's stonewalling. Moultrie was probably not given a lot of information on purpose. I don't know what this is in response to, but I think, how will people be able to handle if telepathy? I mean, I think ESP and PSI is legit. I don't think people are ready for a world where there are no secrets. Lou in front of Congress would be great. You would think they would have already, since you would think. I don't understand how he hasn't been in front. How is Gillibrand not saying, you know what, I want Lou Elizondo here? Maybe there's something I'm missing. And maybe not 10 hours on Valet's latest book, but I'd put it 7-hour Forbidden Science. I need to do it. There's a lot of good stuff in there. I will try. All right, I'm going to go. Thanks again, guys. Thanks for the money, the donations, the questions. I appreciate it. And I don't know when I'm doing it again. I really want to do the Twitter stuff where I just go through there's so much good stuff on Twitter. We'll just play videos from shows and just comment on stuff, because there's a lot of stuff going on. Even some of the negative stuff is worth talking about. Not really negative, but anyway, all right. I'm going to go. Thank you again, and I will see you next time on some show. I don't know what we're doing. So anyway, thanks, guys. Have a good day.